just give you a brief overview, we're going to be talking about the application process for submitting a application for a faculty position, whether that's part-time or full-time. The requirements are very similar. The application, I believe, is almost identical. So there's a few items that we're going to go through that are required in most of the application. Obviously, there's the basic demographic information like name, address, telephone number, education, but there's also some documents that are very helpful to have as attachments to your application. And that includes your curriculum vitae or resume, your letter of interest, and teaching philosophy, and your diversity statement, if you choose to add that as well. Oh, and then a sample syllabi. And I'll give you some information on all of these components as we go through them. Some of these you're very familiar with, such as the cover letter, but there's some things that I want to identify here. I go through it briefly for the ones that are most common. Before you start, some things to consider when developing your letter of interest is to personalize it. I've sat on quite a bit of hiring committees, and I can tell you that when it's very generic and it doesn't identify the institution you're applying to, it's easy to overlook that, because as a panelist on a hiring committee, you want to know that the candidate is invested in coming to your institution and working at your institution. So making identification, number one, to the position you're applying to, and then number two, the institution which houses that position, makes a very significant difference when panelists are reviewing applications. And then the next thing is to assess how your professional experiences align with the position description. So if you look at the duties and responsibilities, try to identify within your letter how you meet those qualifications, how you are going to bring your strengths and your skill set to that institution to excel in that position. And lastly, identify how you will contribute to the department or to the division, right? So in addition to having your skill set match the responsibilities and the duties of the position, what else do you possess as an individual that is going to benefit your department, division, or institution? So whether that is for a faculty position, you have specific research in an area that's up and coming. And for a staff position, it can be a specific skill, a specific certification. Those are some of the things to include in your letter to make your letter stand out. So when personalizing your letter, remember to address the committee members. Sorry, I'm going to backtrack. I thought I was moving on to the next one, but here in the letter, I'm going to identify a few things. And then identify why you're interested in teaching at this institution in particular. If you are looking at the success rates or the equity gaps, study their website. You can look at their accreditation reports to see, it'll give you a holistic view of the institution, and then align yourself with the mission, vision, and values. That's always very important there. And then with your professional experiences, be explicit about how those experiences align. So again, reviewing the required and desired qualifications, and how will you effectively teach students at the institution? If there are many students who, for example, if the institution has a high or a low pass rate in a specific subject that you're going to go into, how are you going to use the co-curricular experiences available to students at that institution to help them excel? What kind of assessment tools you're going to use? And those are the kind of things that are going to help. And then lastly, the curricular contributions. So any additional research, any kind of enhancement to curriculum, whether that's inclusive teaching practices or culturally relevant curriculum. What are some of the things that you're going to embed in your class to ensure that there is proficiency for the overall student experience? There's a question, and it says, when you say post-baccalaureate in the requirements, does that specifically mean actively in graduate school, or just already has a bachelor's degree? So that's anyone who is in the process of within the last year of their graduate program, or has received a master's degree in the last 5 years. Those are the requirements for our program specifically. Okay, so some of the logistics for your cover letter: keep it brief, no more than 1 or 2 pages. Make sure that you attach the correct letter. So remember, I talked about being specific to the institution you're applying for. If you are applying to more than one institution, make sure you're attaching the one that corresponds with the application that you're filling out, because it has happened that we've received cover letters addressed to other institutions. Include your contact information, your most recent, because that is how HR will be reaching out to you. And then lastly, thank the committee members for the time that they use to review your application, and let them know that you look forward to hearing from them. Here are some more resources that are embedded in the presentation. I'm going to share this presentation with the Graduate Resource Center at CSUB. This is a requirement or a document that is unique to teaching positions. So let's go over to the teaching philosophy. So the teaching philosophy is a document that allows you to present yourself as a future faculty for the institution. So number one, share with us why you want to go into teaching. So why do you teach? And then how do you do it and why? So why do you want to go into teaching? What's your passion? And then how do you plan on doing? So include information about your assessment practices, what you use for evaluative practices to reform some of your own curriculum as you move forward from one semester or one term to the next, what skills you want your students to get from your classes that would serve them not just in the curricular process, but also enhance their lives outside of the class. And then again, keep it short and sweet, 1 or 2 pages. You can put some qualitative data into your teaching philosophy, whether that's a written note about the student's experience in your class, or a quote from a theoretical framework that you use to guide or anchor your teaching methods. Those are some of the ways to personalize your teaching philosophy. But if essentially they want to know, why do you teach? How do you do it? And how is this going to impact students' lives? So there's a few philosophies of learning that I've included in here that I'm not going to do a deep dive into, but I definitely wanted you to have a reference. So there's philosophies of learning, and this is andragogy, so adult learning theory, excuse me, which is very similar to pedagogy, which is just the how people learn, right? Looking at how people learn. So looking at ways to address your teaching philosophy, it's important to assess the philosophies of learning. So which one do you feel like your teaching practice is best aligned with, and how you're going to support people's learning styles or methods that vary from your own teaching methods. It's important because that way you are addressing how you're going to serve all student learners and not just the ones that align with your specific teaching philosophy. And there's more information here about some of the sources I used to prepare this slide. So it would be helpful for you to go back and review some of this information in developing your teaching philosophy. And I should mention, if you don't have any teaching experience or very limited, it's okay to annotate that in your documentation, but say, based on my research and my own learning process, this is the teaching philosophy or the learning philosophy that I think aligns best with how I will be teaching in the classroom. So again, because this fellowship focuses on bringing interested candidates into the teaching field, we don't require you to have teaching experience, but we definitely want to see what kind of documents you can develop to help us identify the kind of future faculty you will be on our campus. Now, talking about the simple syllabi. So the syllabus that we typically use is very generic. So I'm going to give you some of the criteria that is required for many of the syllabi that we circulate around our campus. And then I'm going to give you some pointers on how to make your specific syllabi stand out. Some of the generic information includes things like the subject, the course number, the title, the course registration number. Obviously, if you don't have a class that you're currently teaching, you won't have a CRN, but the semester of instruction, all those items are very important to have on your syllabus. So make sure that you have, even if it's a tentative subject course and number, all of that is important to have, even again, if it's tentative or if it's a ghost section. And then the name of the instructor and contact information. So that should include your email. If you use Google Voice, include your Google Voice number, and then your office hours, the location and method. So for example, on mine, for my asynchronous course process. That means that it's solely online. I list my Zoom ID number that I use for my Zoom meetings, and then I list the hours that I'm on Zoom for those office hours. That way, students know that that is how they can expect to attend your office hours, and they know how to access your office hours. And then next is the course description and student learning outcomes. So that is part of every course that is a approved course on campus. So it has to go through the curricular process, and not to get too in detail, you can look at existing courses to develop your syllabus. In fact, you should. If you're interested, for example, Adrianne, I'm going to pick on you for a minute. If you're interested in history, then I would encourage you to go to our course descriptions. You can find that in the catalog or in the department section of our website, and identify the course descriptions and the student learning outcomes, which are all embedded in there. And then both the course description and the learning outcomes have to be included in your syllabus. And then the other thing you have more autonomy over are the required textbooks and other materials. What resources are you going to use to help your students learn and retain the material? And again, that typically includes textbooks or some online resources. And then performance evaluation methods, again, talking about that assessment process, a list of assignments and agenda of how you will be evaluating, right? So whether that's going to be a quiz, a paper, a group presentation, a group assignment, all of that has to be vetted into your syllabus so that your students understand the expectations going into the course, as well as the grading policy. So what if you are in a graded course, meaning that the student earns a letter grade? What is the cutoff score or percentage that they need to attain that specific grade? If you're in a pass, no pass, what's the threshold? So again, a lot of that information is already available in the catalog, depending on the discipline you are pursuing. So again, make sure you reference that. And if you need specific help in getting access to those documents, don't hesitate to reach out. I'll help you navigate our website. And then classroom policies. Do you have a no phone policy, a late policy? What are some of the things that you are going to implement in your classroom to create some kind of classroom management? And that's going to vary. Again, you have autonomy over that one. So make sure that you identify those items carefully. And then the course content or weekly schedule of assignments, that is very important, because again, that is how students utilize the syllabus to identify what are some of the major projects or assignments and how to prepare for those effectively. And then things that are important as well are our current DSPS, which is our Disabled Students Programs and Services Statement, that all of our syllabi have to benefit our students. If there's other resources you want to list, I have like a one pager of the resources on campus, which includes information like our Title IX policies or statement and other information. So again, I'm happy to share some of my documentation to give you a frame of reference so that you are aware of the kind of information that's important to our students. And then lastly, a list of important dates and resources. Important dates, that is something that is valuable to include in there, especially because when you think of things like census date, when a student enrolls in your class, there's a specific deadline to withdraw from your class without the penalty of a W. So that needs to be highlighted in there, as well as the deadline to drop with the W. And then after that point, they can't drop without proven extenuating circumstances. So identifying those timelines is important, but also what holidays are going to occur during that term, right? So if there's going to be a week off for Thanksgiving holiday, if the institution honors things like Veterans Day or Labor Day, those things are important because they shape your class meeting times, and it also affects if you meet in person or you have a synchronous course. That dictates how your curriculum is laid out, right? So you can't have a group presentation assigned on a day when the campus is closed. Obviously, there will be no class. So double check yourself to make sure you're aligning with the important dates. So there's some more links in here about the design of a syllabus that you should reference when developing this documentation.
So what you're getting at with the syllabi, it should mirror essentially what we're used to seeing already, right?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Of course. the diversity statement is not a required document, but it is something that many individuals that are applying to faculty positions choose to include, especially if they're applying to a non-PWI, predominantly white institution, because it's typically a institution that serves a minority, a racial minority body. So whether it's a HSI or other minority serving institution, typically diversity statements are included, but are not typically required. If you choose to include a diversity statement, share your experience of working with diverse groups of people. Even if it's not a racial diversity, you're going to work with students who have diversity of age, right? Have diversity of languages and experiences. And so you want to make sure that you share how you've worked with a diverse student body or a diverse group of people, and how you have successfully navigating serving people with different needs in a way that it does not favor one party over the other. And then how, as a faculty member, you will engage with developing a sense of belonging for your students at your institution, right? So if that includes things like inclusive teaching practices or curriculum that is culturally relevant, what you plan on doing to ensure that your students are able to connect with the curriculum, even though there are an array of students you're serving. You may have students who are returning after serving in the military for some years. So the non-traditional students, you'll have those that are coming right out of high school, which are the more traditional students. So beyond just a racial diversity, how do you serve a group of students that just vary in their needs and academic aspirations because they're in your class in that moment? So how will you service that group of students? And you can again talk about the learning philosophies, how you develop your teaching philosophy to match an array of learning modalities. And so it doesn't have to be exclusive, and it shouldn't be exclusive to racial diversity, but it should be, if you decide to do a diversity statement, you should be explicit in the ways that you are going to enhance the diversity, equity, and inclusion practices of the institution in your classroom. And there's a little bit more in here. I definitely encourage you to look at that toolkit that was developed by MIT, which has more information on how to develop it. And I'm not going to go into this one in too much of detail, again, because it's not required for most institutions, but it is something that if you feel like you want to do, it's something you can look into and develop.
Yes, I reached out to the Career Center. For those of you that are still in school, you can access the Career Center. It's, it's part of your fees that you pay, and they can assist you with the diversity. They have tools and resources for that, and they can proofread your statement. Perfect. I'm also waiting to hear from our faculty teaching learning center about getting assistance with the syllabus, but I haven't heard back from them.
Okay, got it. Thank you, Martha. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Okay, so let's go over to the next one here. And then in this last slide, don't forget the why and the you in the process, right? So there's a lot of advice and a lot of feedback on how to develop these documents, but in doing so, don't forget why you're applying for a position as a future faculty. What is your drive? What is your passion? And use that as your anchor. Don't recreate yourself for the sake of this position. You bring value as an individual, so make sure you market yourself as who you are and not someone that you're not, because that can come through very clearly in the application and also in the interview process. That was dense, huh? That was a lot.